The sun rose over a world that had never heard a human voice, casting long shadows across valleys carved by ice and time. This was the age of stone and survival, when every dawn brought both promise and peril to those who walked the earth. Not just a different time, but a different kind of existence entirely, where hunger was the only clock that mattered. What if you could step into that ancient morning, feel the cold air bite your skin, and know what it meant to truly hunt? Our ancestors woke in darkness, their breath visible in the freezing air, their bodies lean and hardened by endless struggle. They had survived the long winter, but survival was never a destination, only a brief pause between one challenge and the next. The hunters gathered at the edge of camp, their stone-tipped spears catching the first light like promises carved from the earth itself. Each weapon had been shaped over days, every strike of stone against stone a meditation on life and death and the space between. These were not primitive people stumbling through a savage world, but masters of a landscape we could barely comprehend today. They read the forest like a language written in tracks and broken branches, in the way birds fell silent, in the scent carried on the wind. The lead hunter, a woman scarred by encounters with creatures that no longer walked the earth, studied the ground with practiced eyes that missed nothing. Fresh prints in the mud told the story of a herd passing through, massive beasts whose weight had pressed deep into the soil. Mammoths had come down from the high country, driven by the changing seasons, to seek the river valleys where grass still grew green and thick. The hunters moved in silence, their footfalls careful and deliberate, because sound in the prehistoric forest could mean the difference between eating and becoming food. They had tracked these giants for 3 days, following a trail of trampled vegetation and dung that steamed in the morning cold, like small volcanoes. Have you ever wondered what courage it took to face a creature 10 feet tall at the shoulder, armed with nothing but stone and will? The mammoth was more than meat. It was survival itself, enough food to feed the tribe through the coming moons of ice and darkness. But the hunters knew that other eyes watched the herd as well, predators far more dangerous than any human with a spear could ever hope to be. The forest opened into a clearing where the mammoths grazed, their tusks sweeping aside snow to reach the frozen grass beneath. Like ancient plows work in the earth, the hunters spread out, each taking a position that had been planned and practiced until it became instinct carved into muscle and bone. They waited with the patience of stone, because the hunt was not about speed but about reading the moment, when the world would shift in their favor. A young mammoth, separated from the herd by curiosity or carelessness, wandered toward the tree line where death waited in human form and sharpened flint. The signal came, not as a sound but as a movement, a gesture that passed between hunters like electricity through water, instant and understood by all. The first spear flew through the air with a whisper, striking true into the mammoth's flank, and the ancient dance of predator and prey began once more. The beast bellowed, a sound that shook the very air and sent birds exploding from the trees in a dark cloud of panic and wings. The herd turned as one organism, tusks lowering, eyes rolling wide with fear and rage as they recognized the threat that stood before them on 2 legs. But the hunters had already moved, flowing like water around the edges of the clearing, their spears finding marks in the young mammoth's thick hide again and again. This was a terrible arithmetic of survival, where one creature's death meant another's life, and there was no room for mercy in the calculus of hunger. The mammoth stumbled, its legs weakening as blood darkened the snow beneath its feet, painting the white earth red with the price of existence. The hunters closed in, their movements coordinated through years of practice, each knowing their role in this ancient ritual without need for words or commands. Then, from the forest's edge, a shadow emerged that made even the hunters' blood run cold with primal recognition of a greater predator than themselves. A cave lion, massive and scarred, had been watching the hunt with eyes that calculated and waited for the perfect moment to steal the kill. The lion was hunger given form, a killing machine perfected over millions of years, with jaws strong enough to crush bone and claws like curved daggers of death. The hunters faced a choice that had no good answer: abandon their kill and go hungry, or stand and fight a creature that could kill them all. The woman who led them stepped forward, her spear raised, and in that moment she became something more than human, something ancient and unyielding as stone itself. She screamed, a sound that carried in it all the defiance of her species, all the refusal to surrender that had brought humans from caves to campfires. The other hunters joined her cry, their voices rising together in a chorus that said, "We are here. We will not yield. This kill is ours by right of blood." The lion paused, its ears flattening against its massive skull, weighing the risk against the reward with the cold logic of a predator that had survived by choosing its battles. For a long moment that stretched like eternity, the two species faced each other across the dying mammoth, each master of their domain, each unwilling to retreat. Then the lion turned, melting back into the forest shadows, deciding that easier prey existed somewhere in the endless wilderness that was its hunting ground. The hunters exhaled together, the tension draining from their bodies like water from cupped hands, knowing how close they had come to becoming the hunted themselves. They worked quickly now, their stone tools cutting through hide and muscle with practiced efficiency, taking what they needed before other predators arrived to claim their share. Nothing would be wasted, not the meat that would feed them, not the bones that would become tools, not even the hide that would shelter them from winter's bite. This was the wisdom of the Stone Age, the understanding that survival meant using everything, wasting nothing, respecting the life that had been taken to sustain their own. As they worked, the woman hunter paused to press her bloodied hand against the mammoth's massive skull, a gesture of gratitude older than language itself. What would you give to understand that moment, when humans and nature existed in a balance so delicate that every action carried the weight of life and death? The journey back to camp took hours, the hunters carrying meat wrapped in hide, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits lifted by the promise of full bellies. Smoke rose from the campfires ahead, a signal that said home, safety, family, the things that made the hunt worthwhile and gave meaning to the struggle. Children ran out to meet them, their faces bright with excitement, too young yet to understand the danger their parents had faced, but old enough to know the joy of plenty. The elders nodded approval, their weathered faces creasing into smiles, because they remembered their own hunts and knew the courage it took to face the giants of the Ice Age. That night, the tribe gathered around fires that pushed back the darkness, their voices rising in songs that celebrated the hunt and honored the mammoth's sacrifice. They told stories of the chase, each hunter adding their part to the narrative, weaving individual experience into collective memory that would outlive them all by generations. The meat roasted on spits of green wood, the smell of cooking flesh filling the air with a promise of survival. That was sweeter than any modern luxury. Not just food, but community, connection. The bonds that made humans more than solitary hunters and transformed them into something greater than the sum of their parts. The woman who had faced down the cave lion sat apart for a moment, her eyes distant, seeing perhaps the countless hunts that stretched behind and ahead like an endless trail. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new decisions between survival and surrender that would test her strength and wisdom once again. But tonight, her people were fed, her children were safe, and the fire burned bright against the vast indifferent darkness that surrounded their small circle of light. This was the life of prehistoric humans, not brutish or simple, but complex and demanding, requiring intelligence and courage in measures we can barely imagine today. They understood things we have forgotten, like how to read the sky for weather, how to find water in a desert, how to survive when survival seemed impossible. Their knowledge was carved into their bodies through trial and error, through success and failure, through the deaths of those who learned too slowly or too late. What if we could learn from them, not just about the past, but about resilience, about community, about living in balance with the world that sustains us? The fire burned lower as the night deepened, and one by one the tribe members drifted to their shelters, their bellies full, their hearts content with the day's victory. But the woman hunter remained awake, keeping watch, because she knew that the forest never slept and that vigilance was the price of another sunrise. For her people, somewhere in the darkness, the cave lion prowled, and the mammoth herd moved on, and the great wheel of predator and prey continued its eternal turning through time. The stars overhead were the same stars we see today, unchanged witnesses to all the struggles and triumphs of species that have risen and fallen like waves upon a shore. Dawn came again, as it always had and always would, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that our ancestors saw with the same wonder we feel. Today, the hunters rose with the sun, their bodies stiff from yesterday's exertion, but their spirits undaunted, because survival demanded nothing less than constant effort. In eternal hope, they checked their weapons, sharpened their spears, and prepared for whatever the day might bring. Because in the Stone Age there were no days off from the work of staying alive. The children watched and learned, their small hands already learning to chip flint and tie cordage, absorbing the skills that would one day keep them alive when their parents were gone. This was how knowledge passed down through generations, not in books or schools, but in demonstration and practice, in the patient teaching of essential skills by those who had mastered them. The tribe moved through their daily routines with the efficiency of long practice, gathering plants, tending fires, working hide into clothing, each task essential to their continued existence on Earth. They were not waiting for civilization to rescue them from hardship, because they were civilization, the foundation upon which all future human achievement would be built through time. Every tool they made, every fire they kindled, every story they told was a small victory against the entropy that sought to erase them from the world's memory forever. And in those small victories, accumulated over thousands of years, humanity found its strength and its future, building towards something they could never have imagined in their wildest dreams. The mammoth bones from yesterday's hunt would become tools that would last for years. Scrapers and needles and awls that would serve the tribe long after the meat was eaten. Nothing was temporary in the Stone Age, because resources were too precious to waste and every object had to serve multiple purposes. Across its useful life and beyond, the woman hunter taught her daughter to read tracks that morning, showing her how to distinguish the print of a deer from that of a horse, knowledge that might save the girl's life. She spoke of the cave lion with respect, not fear, because fear was a luxury they could not afford when every creature in the forest was both potential food and potential death. The daughter listened with the intensity of someone learning the difference between survival and extinction, her young mind absorbing lessons that schools would never teach to modern children today. By midday, the tribe had moved to a new location, following the herds, as they always had, because staying in one place meant depleting resources and inviting starvation's cold embrace. They were nomads not by choice but by necessity, reading the land's abundance and scarcity like a book written in grass and game, and the changing of seasons through endless cycles. Their camps were temporary, their possessions few, but their knowledge was vast and their connection to the earth was something we have lost in our concrete cities and climate-controlled comfort. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the hunters went out again, because hunger was a daily reality that required daily answers and constant vigilance against want. The cycle continued, hunt and gather, move and settle, birth and death, the fundamental rhythm of life that had sustained humans since they first stood upright and looked toward the distant horizon. Seasons turned, years passed, generations rose and fell like grass in the wind. But the essential pattern remained unchanged for thousands of years of human prehistory and struggle. Then, slowly, things began to change as humans learned to plant seeds and domesticate animals, to build permanent shelters and store food against the lean times ahead in coming winters. But that was still thousands of years in the future for the mammoth hunters. who lived and died knowing only the life of the chase and the campfire's warmth. Today, we find their tools buried in ancient soil, their cave paintings hidden in darkness, their bones lying beside the bones of the creatures they hunted so long ago. These fragments are all that remain of lives lived with an intensity and purpose we can barely comprehend from our safe distance across the vast canyon of time. The woman hunter and her daughter, the tribe around the fire, the mammoth in the clearing, all are gone now, returned to the earth that sustained them for their brief moment in the sun. But their legacy lives in us, in the DNA that carries their adaptations, in the brain that still responds to ancient threats, in the heart that still seeks the warmth of community and fire. We are them, separated by time but connected by blood and bone, and the unbroken chain of survival that links every human who has ever drawn breath on earth. When you feel the satisfaction of a meal shared with loved ones, you are feeling what they felt around their fires 10,000 years ago in the Ice Age cold. When you face a challenge that seems impossible, you are drawing on the same courage that made them stand before the mammoth with only stone and will as weapons against death. The prehistoric humans were not primitive versions of us, but complete humans facing a different world with the same hopes and fears that drive us today. Through modern challenges, they loved their children, mourned their dead, celebrated their victories, and faced their fears with the same mix of courage and doubt that defines the human experience across all ages. In the end, the hunt was never just about the mammoth, but about what it means to be human, to struggle and survive, to care and connect, to endure. The stone tools they left behind are more than artifacts. They are messages from our ancestors saying we were here, we mattered, we survived against all odds and impossibility. And because they survived, we are here to tell their story, to honor their courage, and to remember that we carry within us the strength of those who hunted in the age of ice. The fire has burned down to embers now, but the story continues in us, in every choice we make, in every challenge we face, in the endless human journey through time toward an unknown future.